part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Hawks POSTCAST, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's quick hitting local insight after every game you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. The Hawks POSTCAST is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Now, the Hawks were back home to take on the Clippers, but it felt like for a long stretch of this game, the Clippers took over. We'll talk about that, and we'll give our takes on why the Hawks were not able to pull off a win. Because listen, there was no number 3, there was no number 1, but that no number 1 was the problem in the Hawks 115-92 loss to the Los Angeles Clippers tonight. But for you, DeShaun, it started almost from the tip because you said early turnovers stole the show.
There was also no number 11, and I don't know what jersey uniform number that Kristaps Porzingis wears, but I have to be the one to yet again throw this in people's face.
Yeah.
That there's a reason why I don't know what number he wears, because I never see him wearing it, by the way.
Now, we had a sighting tonight, DeShaun, because we did see he's number 8, by the way. We had a sighting, DeShaun, because he was actually on the bench, and some were taking that as some encouragement. But I take what you said to heart. I don't know your number because I don't see you suit up enough.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, encouraging because I see him actually in the building, I guess is some sort of encouragement. But nonetheless, I can't blame him too much for what we saw from a turnover standpoint. Whoever came up with this narrative or this really cool thing to say that it's better to give than to receive I don't agree with that as far as tonight goes. That's for sure. Far too many turnovers, 16, and the way that this was going, I just didn't feel really good about it. I guess they improved on that a little bit, considering there was like 8 of them in the first quarter, so half of those all came in the very first quarter, I guess. But that's pretty much what stole the show for me on tonight. Just definitely not a very good look. And I get it. No Jalen Johnson. He makes up for a lot of those, turnovers with his ball handling ability. Not having Trey is a whole nother animal. We should be used to that by now. Sure. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is pretty much a point guard by committee at this point. And it just kind of pretty much is what it is. But just the inability to be able to protect the most precious thing, that basketball, is ultimately the reason why the Atlanta Hawks fell tonight. And we'll just have to see as they get ready to prepare for a very busy back-to-back weekend.
Indeed. And, DeShaun, it's not lost on me that when you look at Jalen Johnson, and I know we're going to talk about his absence from various angles tonight, but this was essentially a 23-point loss for the Hawks. Jalen Johnson averages 23 points a game, along with 10 rebounds, and we'll talk about the challenges that they faced on the board.
Your game.
But that's your game, because they also got out-rebounded. It was a little bit more of a margin there than 10, because that's what he averages on the season. But again, if you look at the differential at about a 14 rebound clip, he gets 10 of those, right? Yeah. So, when you start kind of digging into the numbers, while you don't want to make it seem as much as like it's that black and white, but it kind of sort of is. But more importantly, I think the black and white is what you just called out, which is turnovers. When you are turning the ball over at the early clip, because obviously, no pun intended, when you're turning the ball over at the early clip, when you have those 8 turnovers in that first quarter, regardless of whether or not you finish the game with just 16 and shout out to the Hawks for being able to kind of contain that issue the rest of the way. But it was almost like, in watching the damage that was done, when you put yourself in that hole and then your opponent capitalizes on it, what happens, DeShaun, is you end up fighting an uphill battle the rest of the way. So I felt like, the Hawks lost by 23, but really and truly, it was the fact that you dug a hole so deep so early. Mm-hmm. You made it very difficult on yourself. And so I want to talk about another hole that they tend to dig. That was my take, right? And that was the other players may have kind of sort of missed the memo. So let me shout out one of our colleagues who, you guys, definitely, you always do support us at our Locked On Hawks postcast with Brad Rowland, our colleague. Definitely want to check him out once you wrap up our show. But he asked Quinn Snyder earlier tonight, of course, pregame, about the defensive rebounding woes the Hawks have had lately. So Quinn said they put a lot of emphasis on missing blockouts, not being aggressive enough, even when they do get a blockout. And he said for him, the biggest thing about the way the Hawks approach rebounding is the mentality. That spoke volumes to me, because you and I often talk about going past the numbers and trying to determine, was it the mindset that the Hawks went into the game with? Was it the effort that was lacking? And this is one of those where Quinn, it was subtle, but it was a little bit of a call out on the mentality, because he went on to say that sometimes, for example, you see rebounds and you know that rebound's going to be long, but instead the players are finding themselves getting tied up inside, and then that ball is sailing over their heads and there's no opportunity for them to recover. The other team, on the other hand, is playing the game as if the ball's going to go in and not go in. So they become defenders at that moment, and they are preparing them for that long rebound off the missed three, right? Or even the long rebound off the missed two. Hawks are not. So he said they have to have a pack mentality, so that and he called out in a good way, when meaning Onyeka Okongwu, is tied up and wrestling down low, if he can't get it, if he can't get there, it's your job to do that. And I think, DeShaun, not enough players are understanding that it's their job to do it. I mean, Double O had 9 rebounds, so he gave you what he needed to give you as far as the rebounding piece is concerned, right? But when I look down the rest of the box score, nobody else really came to play at that end to make sure that the Clippers didn't have opportunities for second chance points, which they did. So again, when you look down that box score and you see 13 offensive rebounds from the Clippers, and you see 25 second chance points, and you lose the game by 23, that's a stat line you can't ignore.
No, I agree with that, Tenitra. And you know what, as adamant as you are about it, I think that the team should be as well. It certainly doesn't help that the Clippers opened up the game on a 9-2 run, turned that into an 14-4 run. And the Clippers weren't necessarily making all those shots. It wasn't because they were just hot either. The Hawks probably just obviously couldn't score. It felt like a lid was on the rim, and the rebounding, second chance points, amongst other things, is the reason for why the Clippers were able to get off into that hot start. Now, should we be having the conversations about rebounds as much as we do when you got a guy that's tall enough to change the light bulbs on the top of the arena sitting down? Because you know I'm still going to continue to push that in people's faces. I'm never gonna let that down, because that helps, and that's what you brought the person here to do. I digress. That's a whole different conversation. But I will say enough to say that it has been a consistent issue, which is obvious. The Atlanta Hawks have been sacrificing an average of 60 rebounds per game in the last 3, which I would only imagine, with being out rebounded 54-38 tonight. Probably doesn't help that number very much. That's the 3rd worst in the NBA. You got Zubac out there, who's a rebounding machine. He's averaging about 12 rebounds per night. He had 17 on tonight. That only improves his numbers. It's just definitely not a good look when you already don't have your players. Guys are playing out of position. There's some instances where you got Mohamed Gay, who's playing the center position, which is just not ideal for any team or anybody, any situation, anything, anywhere, anytime. It's going to be hard to win basketball games when you don't have the ability to give yourself a chance at putting the ball in the basket. Forget about just second chance points, even on the defensive side. I love to say that, I don't like to say it's making it seem like it's really easy, but rebounding is nothing more than just technique and effort. But sometimes if you just don't have the Jimmys and the Joes out there, you don't have guys with long arms, minus Zachary Resacher. You don't have guys out there that could just pull down rebounds, or even getting after the ones like I saw a couple times tonight that went hard off the rim and bounced on the floor. Those are ones that the little speedy, quick guards, even for the Atlanta Hawks, should be able to scoop up, and it just clearly wasn't their night.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I think that's the subtlety in what Quinn Snyder was saying as well. Like, not just those long rebounds, if you will, but some of those things that you have to scrap and scrape in on the inside. And I think you made a perfect point when it kind of bounces in sort of the sweet spot, if you will, where, and when I say sweet spot, meaning that's anybody's ball, right? Then that should
50 balls.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's that 50-50 ball that your guards, your backcourt should be able to bring you some help. And your backcourt shouldn't have a combined 8 rebounds. Like, you're just going to need to see a little bit more from them in order for the Hawks to kind of offset, like you said, maybe some of the advantages when their big lineup, or as we say in football, their jumbo lineup isn't on the floor. Somehow, some way, you got to accommodate it with your mindset and your approach to rebounding. But it wasn't just about the turnovers. It wasn't just about getting beat on the boards. There were some other things that the Hawks did that were the turning point for tonight's game. We'll talk about that on the other side. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. So if you want to grab those seats, for instance, for Friday night when the Hawks take on the Nuggets, you're looking for a bounce back, it couldn't have been simpler. Great seats in minutes, you'll see. And what you see is what you pay. No hidden fees at checkout. And their zone deals are game changers. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, if you are able to, after you watch our show, of course, wrap up our show, you can go to the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. It's easy to swipe, tap, ticket, and go. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Drip Drop. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. And that is real talk. I mean, my focus, my energy, mood, even my skin, it glows. That's why I've been using Drip Drop, a doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. And Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes, but the most important piece, at least for me, is half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. And you're going to like using Drip Drop as a part of your daily routine. It's real simple. You just mix the packet in the morning before the gym, or if you're like me, go to the gym a little late morning, early afternoon. And sometimes, we have that little crash and burn in the midday. It's great for that midday slump. So right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. So go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNBA for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard, and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Well, DeShaun, the pesky second quarter and third quarter rear their ugly heads. It is funny to say second quarter, right? Because really you and I have been talking about that third quarter and how pesky it is. But tonight it started a little bit sooner for the Hawks as far as when the game got away from them. And that was the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
And we, of course, appreciate you guys for making the Hawks Postcast your first listen of the day. We appreciate you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And as always, appreciate you guys giving us your thoughts about what the turning point was tonight. But yeah, when you look at it, as you pointed out, DeShaun, we were talking about it a little bit before the show officially began. Like, if you look at this game, there were definitely moments, like at the beginning of the second quarter, for example, Hawks go on 17-7 run. But then right around that 4:40 mark, the Clippers go on an 8-0 run. and in that second quarter. And then they really, really start to distance themselves because they take that. Sometimes you look for the reset during halftime. Reset didn't happen for the Hawks. Clippers take that type of momentum into that third quarter. And really and truly, that's where you look at it. And it's not super obvious because you're thinking to yourself, okay, Clippers only outscored the Hawks 28-20 in that second quarter, then only 39-32 in that third quarter. But to your point, if you combine what they started before halftime and kind of finished after halftime, that is that 15-point gap that the Clippers were able to establish and really never look back.
And all of that was really created by that, end of second quarter, beginning of the third quarter. Don't know what was discussed in the locker room at that time. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure with the lineups that both teams had active on tonight, rotations and so forth, that it would have made much of a difference. But Clippers going to 15-0 or 15-1 run. Atlanta during that time missing multiple free throws. I get it. Yes. You're out there on the island, whatever, what have you. But you know how we think, Tenitra, that is essentially the free space on a bingo card. Those are free. Nobody's running out there at you. There are no distractions. You're at home. Nope. All of those things. They go 0 for 7 from the field and 2 turnovers. Only 2 turnovers of all 16 of them. But of course, in turn, the Los Angeles Clippers had 10 rebounds in that little span. 10 rebounds in that small span. Of course, 2 of those, 2 dunks or whatever, what have you, which sometimes a dunk, while it's still just worth 2 points, the same as any regular field goal inside of the arc, it definitely puts a little bit more of an exclamation and kind of takes the wind out of you a little bit, and kind of the motivation that you may have been trying to build and establish for yourself throughout the duration of the game. And then you even start looking at some of the things that the Atlanta Hawks were not able to do that the Clippers were. Luckily, I think that the Atlanta Hawks were able to kind of detain, I guess, a little bit John Collins in his previous matchups against the Hawks. Tonight, a game that kind of appeared to be a little bit like his old self. We haven't seen that from him since he left Atlanta against games against the Hawks. 15 points for him, 9 rebounds on the night. I think he really contributed to what the Clippers were able to do, and just really kind of helping get him going to take some of the attention off of the obvious, being Kawhi Leonard and James Harden.
Yeah, and give John Collins a lot of credit, because you were talking about how dunks sometimes can inflate a team or sometimes and deflate the other team. But John Collins, like Mo Gay was in there. Oh, I'm sorry. Onyeka Okongwu was in there making sure that one of those dunks didn't come to fruition. But John Collins shook it off and kept it moving. And like you said, was able to contribute for the Clippers. And I have to agree with you on that one. When we look down into what those opportunities were, and small opportunity, but again, it's when things start to stack. So when you were talking about how the Clippers out rebounded, that's stacking on in that short period of time, that stretch, if you will. When you look at the Clippers finishing with 85% from the free throw line compared to the Hawks just under 79%, that's the kind of thing where little by little, it starts to just chip away. And before you know it, before you know it, you're scratching your head wondering, like, wow, did we just lose a game by 23 points? And I'll be honest with you, it was a weird thing at State Farm Arena. Like, it was a quiet 23 points, and maybe that's because there was a little bit of energy and excitement in the building. Big Boy, I think, was there as they were celebrating Outkast's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and their alma mater, or the high school they went to, Tri-Cities. They performed just excellent at halftime. So there was just still this energy in the building that was generated off the court that kind of made you think, like, for a second, what was going on the court just wasn't the main character of the movie. But when you put it all together, I think it was more of exactly what you said, the combination of what happened, where, not that it was a big deal, because I don't know that Chris Paul was doing very much before the Clippers decided to move on without him, but they were able to not skip a beat without Chris Paul. it was very apparent, and I talked about this a couple games ago. It's one thing for Trae Young to be out of the lineup.
Right.
That was going to be a lengthy stretch of time. So as a staff, a coaching staff, Quinn Snyder's guys had to decide, hey, how are we going to kind of do this point guard thing by committee, right?
That's right.
So, yeah, so you kind of knew it was going to be that for them. But we're now talking about multiple games with Kristaps Porzingis. And, yeah, I understand that we knew, like, our over-under was somewhere in the 50s for our hope as far as the games that he'd play. But I think for me, I was thinking, like, maybe that would be closer to, like, late season management, like load management. I didn't think I was hoping we wouldn't have this conversation so early in the season, because we know what the Hawks were able to do in cup play last year and how that really kind of bolstered them heading into January. Yeah. So I think we kind of thought, okay, you get Porzingis healthy at the beginning of the season, Jalen Johnson healthy at the beginning of the season, like they could do that. And they were looking good. They were looking good for a minute, but this not having all of those pieces, JJ and Porzingis and Trae Young, that's kind of a lot to have to manage through.
And you know what, I'll agree with that. And the last thing that I'll say here too is that, you know, when you have games such as this where you have guys out and all of these different situations transpiring, and the best thing you could do is really kind of keep you know, the Clippers off guard. Not that, like you said, not that Chris Paul does a whole lot anyways, but maybe just try and catch them when their attention isn't focused necessarily on the game and onto other things. I think you had to kind of contain, because you're never going to be able to stop Kawhi Leonard and James Harden with the defensive ability from Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dyson Daniels. Of course, Harden and Kawhi end up combining for 48, but you can't afford to really send both of those guys who are free throw merchants to the free throw line as much as they do already. So you want to prevent that. But I really thought they needed at least 15 points from Asa Newell and somewhere close to 20 from Luke Kennard. They got 11 each out of them tonight, which clearly just wasn't enough.
Yeah, and some of that may be that you just got to play them more. Like, I mean, Asa Newell got the 11 points in 19 minutes, so you got to wonder maybe if he would have been inserted a little bit more, because Mo Gay got 22 minutes and Mo Gay gave you no points and he only gave you 6 rebounds. So I'll be interested to see, as we were talking about before, how Quinn Snyder manages through. Really, we were talking about the 4, but how he manages through at the 4-5 come Friday, especially. We hope Jalen's a go. We hope Kristaps is a go, but if one or both of them can't go Friday, be interested to see how he manages his front court. The Hawks Postcast is the #1 place to hang out after every game and is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, head over to Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.